All right, well, good morning, everyone. Happy Monday. Hope you're enjoying Pack Expo thus far. Thank you so much for taking your time to be with me today to talk about packaging life cycle assessment and analysis. We have about 15-20 minutes together, so I'll try to stay on track. I definitely am quite the talker, so I did just start my own little timer for myself so I don't get too far off track. But then I am hoping to have at least 5 minutes at the end just for any questions that anyone may have. So my name is Bree Herbert. I am with Orbis Corporation. We do reusable packaging for the retail supply chain space as well as the industrial supply chain, so automotive and white goods and whatnot. I'm specifically the product manager for our automotive products, so focusing on our reusable plastic packaging in the supply chain, so totes, pallets, bulk containers, but we also do offer racks and interior dunnage as well. I have been with Orbis for about 5 years, including my internship. And aside from just product management, I am heavily focused internally and externally on environmental goals and sustainability initiatives, not only internally for Orbis, but also externally for the companies that we serve. So before we dive into packaging life cycle assessment and how you calculate reusable packaging and how it makes an environmental impact within your supply chain, I wanted to lay the groundwork to what actually is sustainability. Why are we all here? Why are we even calculating the packaging life cycle, and what does it mean? So I don't like to assume things, but I'm pretty confident that everyone talks a lot about sustainability. Within the last 5 years, it was, started off more so as a buzzword, and now today, as I stand up here talking to all of you, it very much so is a prominent initiative within many companies. It's a term that's talked about not only within your companies, but also a term that's talked about within your inner circle, family or friends. It's not a buzzword anymore. It's very much so out there, and there's active initiatives that are being taken place. So sustainability is defined by meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And I think that talking about the 4 pillars of sustainability is very, very important when going into understanding the full life cycle assessment of packaging, because you can't just have environmental goals and not think about the other factors that those initiatives have within your company, as well as in your social circle as well. You have to think about, how is it going to affect my employees? How is it going to affect my consumers? Does it make sense from a social standpoint? Does it benefit those working for me? Do they enjoy doing this type of work? And then economic as well. At the end of the day, the world does run on money. So even though we want to make sure that we are doing our best to make the world a better place, we also have to make sure that the return on investment for those environmental initiatives makes sense. So at the end of the day, you and me, we still have jobs. We can still have money to purchase goods, and the world continues to still run. So 4 pillars of sustainability, all very much so factors to take into consideration. I think this cut out just a little bit, but I wanted to touch on just the overall concept of circular economy, and I absolutely love this slide and what the circular economy is, because the packaging life cycle assessment very much so focuses on the circular economy. So the circular economy takes into consideration the raw materials, the very beginning of materials and how materials are made. Are they being made environmentally friendly, or what does that process look like? Then from using that raw material into making an actual product, how is that product being made? Is it environmentally friendly with how it's being processed or made? So in this case, packaging. What does that manufacturing process look like? What does that raw materials look like for packaging? And then the overall design and framework of the product itself. Is it going to be a long-lasting product that can serve for a long time and serve its purpose within the supply chain, where you're not having to replace it or whatnot? And then the overall end cycle or end use of that product itself. Can it be recycled? And then even take it a step further, and can we recycle it and then repurpose it back into a new product or the same product? So you constantly have that circular aspect of the full entire life cycle of that product. So this takes us into the overall circular economy concept into reusable packaging. So reusables, I like to refer to them as the 4 R's. You have reduce. The first R is reduce, which is reducing single-use expendable packaging out in the supply chain. So by doing this, you're reducing waste of that single-use packaging. You're also having the benefit of adding standardization within your packaging. So this helps cube out truckloads a little bit better, line side, whatever it may be. And then we're also seeing a lot more automation. So it helps the automation process as well when you have standardization within your packaging. The second R is reuse. So I would like to say that reuse could possibly be one of the most important R's. I think all the R's are very important, but reuse is especially important because it doesn't make sense to have a reusable packaging system if you're not going to get the full extent of that packaging's life cycle. You have to make sure that you're reusing it, because the more you're reusing that packaging, the less you're having to manufacture new packaging to refill that packaging fleet. And when you have to constantly be remaking packaging, you're using more resources, carbon emissions, water, greenhouse gas emissions, energy, all of that. So the more packaging that you constantly have to be remaking, the more of a negative environmental impact that is going to have. Third R is recycle, so being able to recycle the packaging at the end of its life. And then the fourth R, which is my favorite because it can get a little bit fun and you can get creative with how you choose to do so, which is repurpose that packaging material once it's recycled, maybe into new packaging, the same type of packaging or a different type of packaging, or maybe even a different product if it makes sense. So aside from the 4 R's, there's a couple of different packaging design considerations that you can look into to help lower your environmental impact. And all of these that are listed on the screen are considerations that you can put into the life cycle assessment that we'll get into in a little bit. So the first part, which is what I touched a little bit on earlier, which is cube utilization. So making sure that you have the right size packaging to maximize your trailer, so you're not shipping a trailer that has empty space. Or maybe it's how maybe you have to reevaluate what parts you're putting into the packaging and making sure that you're maximizing the amount of pieces per part of that packaging, because the more pieces that you can get into a packaging is the more pieces that you can get onto a truckload, and then that's fewer carbon emissions and fewer trucks that you have to use. Lightweight packaging. So I'm a strong believer in finding the right packaging solution for your application. A metal rack isn't always going to make sense for all components, just like a tote isn't going to make sense versus a bulk container or a sleeve pack. It's making sure that you have the right packaging for your solution where the packaging is going to last the longest, and then the component that you are shipping isn't getting damaged at all. But the less weight that you are able to put on a truck also equals less fuel and emissions as well. So taking into consideration the actual weight of the packaging solution is also important. Also looking at collapsibility and nestability. So if you have return shipments where you are able to collapse maybe a bulk container or a rack or a tote, that's important as well, because you get more packaging systems when you're collapsed into a truck, and then that's less trucks that you need to backhaul. And then, like I said, recycled and alternative materials, which just can get a little fun. So we have ocean and mined material that's been commonly used, but also just looking at standard recycled content. So recycled high-density polyethylene or polypro. When you're using recycled content, you're removing the need to have to extract that virgin material. So that's fewer carbon emissions when you use recycled content. So taking all of that into consideration, so packaging design considerations, as well as taking into consideration the 4 R's, we can use that information into measuring the overall impact of your packaging solution or your packaging fleet. So this is what we call the packaging life cycle analysis. So the packaging life cycle analysis, think back to that I think it was my second slide that I had of the circular economy, where it starts off with the resources that you need to have to create your product. So we're talking about packaging. So this would be the material for packaging. So that could be plastic, that could be steel, that could be a fabric type if you're doing some sort of dunnage. So the resources that it takes to create that packaging, it's cutting off a little bit, but then manufacturing that product as well. And then the shipment in between all of that. So shipping that raw material to the manufacturing site, manufacturing it into a product, then shipping that product to the end user or whoever is needing that packaging. And then taking into consideration how that packaging is used. How does it cube out the trailer? How many parts per pieces are you getting into the packaging? And then at the end of its life, it takes into consideration the end of life program management. So if you're recycling it and then repurposing it into a new product. So this is a questionnaire form. You're probably not going to be able to see, because it's very, very small, all of the questions. But some of the data inputs that we do start off with before calculating the life cycle and the environmental impact of the packaging, we start off with the total packaging fleet. So how many totes are you using, or how many pallets are you using? And then turning it into product type. So we can measure a plastic tote container, bulk container, rack, pallet. It chooses the type of packaging that you are using. And then you also have a chance to also choose the type of packaging that you are removing and replacing with a certain type. So you can look at a plastic pallet versus a wood pallet, a bulk container versus a corrugated box, stuff like that. And then you also can take it a step further and look at a side-by-side of a tote, like a reusable tote versus a reusable tote, and take into consideration if you're changing up how many pieces you're shipping in that tote, or maybe the recycled content that you're using in the tote. You can also do a side-by-side of a reusable versus a reusable and have a little fun with it and get creative with different design considerations that you can do. And then also truckload quantities we ask, and then trip distance and turn. So if you have a long loop, if you're maybe shipping something from Mexico to Canada, or maybe you're shipping something I'm from Wisconsin, so I'm just gonna use Wisconsin, but maybe shipping something from Wisconsin over to Germany or Asia, you can take that into consideration. And then the average program life. So is your packaging on average lasting 5 years? Is it lasting 10 years? And then versus that single-use packaging that doesn't last that long. And then the end of life plan, so how it's being recycled, the shipment to actually recycle the containers, all of that. It gets very, very in-depth with the detail that the questionnaire, the type of questions that the questionnaire asks. So then this gets us into the overall results. And these are just some high-level sample results that we have. But once you put in all the information in the questionnaire, it kicks out these results. So it focuses on solid waste, global warming potential, so that's your carbon emissions, total energy demand, and then water consumption. And then I don't have it on this screen, but we also do other greenhouse gas emissions as well, that if you're really, really looking into the nitty-gritty details, we do have a chance to do other greenhouse gas emissions. So as you can see, it breaks out onto the actual results, the different sectors of the packaging life cycle. So the production, the end of life, the return, the production, all of that, and then gets it to an end total. So as you can see, you have a chance to do a reusable versus a reusable, which is that Orbis HDPE part. So you could do a reusable tote versus reusable tote, maybe change up the recycled content, and then also compare it to a corrugated or single-use solution. So if you are interested in playing around with the life cycle analysis calculator, Orbis's booth is actually right behind you. And we do have the calculator on site. We have our senior project manager, Mike Nassif, here with us today. And he would be happy to walk through just different scenarios of the actual life cycle analysis calculator, play around with it. You don't have to have specifics, but it is just interesting to see what different parts and considerations and how it plays a factor into the overall environmental impact of your supply chain. With that, I'm hoping I'm on time and didn't go too fast or too slow. So at this time, I'll open the floor to any questions if anyone has any.
Yeah, my question was about the assumption when you compare returnable with the corrugated boxes. Do you assume recycling of corrugated boxes and some
You can
recycled
put
content?
that input in. And to be clear, and I am just realizing I didn't touch on this, our specific calculator that we have takes for the reusable packaging systems, it takes actual Orbis manufacturing data inputs. For corrugated, obviously we don't have access to the manufacturing processes and the amount of energy and carbon emissions that's used a corrugated supplier would use or a wood pallet supplier would use. So we worked with a third party and they take the average manufacturing inputs for that. But as far as recycled content, again, if there's recycled content in the corrugated solution, we very much so can put that into the calculator and take that into consideration. I think I saw another question over here. Thanks.
Hi. Thank you, first of all, for the presentation. My question was around how are you seeing your customers utilize this? Is it mostly for their internal reporting? Are they reporting this externally? And if so, are there sort of considerations around indemnity or the types of claims they can make?
Yeah, great question. And we get this question a lot of, okay, cool, you have this tool, how is it used? So I would say in the automotive industry, so like I said, Orbis, we serve the retail supply chain and then the automotive industry and industrial industry. I would say for the industrial and automotive, they're taking this calculations to report to their upper management to say, okay, we've been doing reusables for quite some time. This is, how much energy or carbon emissions we're saving, because a lot of companies are having, more broadcasted goals out there of we're going to reduce our carbon emissions by X by 2030 and all of that. So how does this calculator help them reach those goals when you're looking at scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 carbon emissions? And then on the flip side, for the retail supply chain, I would say that a lot of this is for conversion. So helping the justification of going from single-use packaging to reusables. So for that, this is a two-part factor play. We have to run a return on an investment calculator to get that economic factor in the sustainability pillars, and then also alongside the actual life cycle analysis calculator, and then using those two pieces as justifications to convert over to reusables. Any others? Any hard questions out there?
Just curious, how much the model changes from industry to industry. You, in your space, you have retail and obviously automotive. If you were to go to another industry, is that a tweak or is it a complete new model if you think about the...
Sure. Okay. I think if I heard you correctly, you're asking if the different industries, are there different considerations we have to take into and how does that change it? Not really, because if you're looking at the retail supply chain versus the automotive supply chain, you're really looking at the loops. So what are the loops? How many parts are getting into a tote or a bulk container? Or, in the retail supply chain space, if there's, bottle trays or whatnot, and at the end of the day, as long as we have how many parts you're shipping in a truckload with how many containers you're shipping in a truckload, it's all what we really need, and it doesn't vary by much. So good question, though. All right, if there's no other questions, or if you just want to ask me a question later, again, Orbis is in the booth right behind you. So myself and then our senior project manager, Mike Nassif, will be here all day. So if you have any questions, also feel free to follow myself on LinkedIn and then Orbis Corporation as well for more updates on reusable packaging and environmental impacts. But thank you very much, everyone. I really appreciate your time and hope you crush your week.